On the American frontier, a pregnant woman was the loneliest person on the land. No doctor, no hospital, no one coming to check on her. She worked the fields until the contractions hit, delivered in a cabin she swept that morning, and was back on her feet before the week was out. 7 times. 8. 10. She buried the ones who did not make it and never wrote it down. The movies turned this into a 30-second scene with boiling water and a man in rolled-up sleeves. The truth was longer, harder, and far more dangerous. What was the most dangerous thing about being pregnant on the frontier? By number 1, the answer may not be what you expect. Now, before we go any further, tap that subscribe button. Keep watching. The ending of this list is simply unbelievable. We are not going to the novels for this. We are going to the women who were there, the trail diaries they wrote in pencil by firelight, the midwife logbooks where every delivery and every death was scratched into the record, the census mortality schedules, the letters home that were never meant for strangers to read. Between 1840 and 1860 alone, roughly 400,000 people crossed the overland trails west. They crossed into territory where the nearest physician might be 50 miles away, or 100, or simply not there at all. If a doctor could be found, what he knew was not what we know. The germ theory of disease would not be accepted in American medicine until the 1880s. Antiseptic surgery was still decades from reaching any frontier cabin. Anesthesia for childbirth was a theological debate, not a medical standard. A woman delivering a child in 1850 had more in common with a woman in labor in 1550 than with any mother in a hospital today. Among the thousands who made the crossing were women who were pregnant, who delivered in dirt floor cabins or beside wagon wheels with no trained help, and who either survived or did not. Most of them left no record at all. The ones who did left something so raw and so honest that the legend builders never knew what to do with it. So let us start at the bottom and work our way up to the truth. Number 25. There was no word for it. In the middle of the 19th century, pregnancy was socially unspeakable. A woman did not say she was pregnant. She was in a family way. She was in confinement. She was indisposed. Medical guides of the era were written for physicians, not mothers. Dr. William Dewees published his treatise on the diseases of females and instructed doctors to examine pregnant women by touch alone, never by sight. Even the physical examination was conducted through a bedsheet. A woman could be 7 months along, and her own neighbors would not mention it in her presence. Newspapers would not print the word. Polite conversation could not hold it. The result was that a woman going through the most physically demanding experience of her life could not ask a direct question about it in public, could not name what was happening to her body, and could not seek help without first finding a way around the shame of admitting she needed it. The silence surrounded every pregnancy like a wall. Before the danger even began, the shame was already in place. Number 24. Prenatal care did not exist. Not the modern version of it. The entire concept. No scheduled visits, no monitoring. Blood pressure measurement itself did not become routine medical practice until the early 1900s. A woman learned she was expecting and then simply waited. What she had was whatever her mother told her, whatever an older neighbor remembered, and whatever she could find in a home medical guide if she was lucky enough to own one. Gunn's Domestic Medicine, one of the most popular household references of the era, offered advice on pregnancy that ranged from the sensible to the dangerous, and most women had no way to tell the difference. The first trained person she might see was whoever showed up when labor began. Everything between conception and delivery she managed alone. The first prenatal clinic in the United States did not open until 1911. For every woman on this list, that clinic came too late by decades. Number 23. She wore the corset anyway. Social expectation did not bend for pregnancy. Maternity corsets existed, designed to hold the silhouette while the belly grew, and women laced into them through the middle and even the late months. The stays were made of whalebone or steel, stitched into heavy cotton, pressing against the ribs and the abdomen while the child grew beneath them. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to earn a medical degree in the United States in 1849, argued publicly that tight lacing endangered mother and child. Most women kept lacing. The alternative was a visible pregnancy, which carried its own punishment. The corset was not vanity. It was armor against a world that demanded women endure this and then pretend it was not happening. Number 22. The fields did not wait. On a working homestead, rest was a word that belonged to someone else's life. Women hauled water from wells or streams, sometimes carrying 2 buckets at a time across uneven ground. They split wood for the stove. They fed chickens and milked cows and worked the garden through every month, bending and lifting with a belly that made every task harder than the last. Amelia Stewart Knight was pregnant with her 8th child on the Oregon Trail in 1853. Her diary records: walking beside the wagon, fording rivers, cooking for a family of 9, day after day. On one entry, she writes of the dust so thick she could not see the wagon ahead. On another, a river crossing where the water reached the wagon bed and the children screamed. She never once wrote the word pregnant. We only know because the baby appears in a September entry near the end of the trail, born somewhere in Oregon Territory. The child's name was Chatfield. She wrote around the pregnancy the way all of them did. The work did not pause, and neither did she. Number 21. Confinement meant exactly what it said. In the final weeks, a woman was expected to withdraw from public life entirely. In eastern towns, this was a social ritual. On a Nebraska homestead, it was closer to solitary. She might not see another adult face for weeks. Molly Dorsey Sanford, who homesteaded near Nebraska City in the late 1850s, wrote in her diary about the weight of the silence around her. The wind against the sod walls and nothing else. No footsteps on the road, no voice at the door. Her husband, if he was present at all, had likely never witnessed a birth. Many men were away working claims or hired out for wages during the months their wives carried. And even when a husband was home, the culture of the time meant he stayed outside the room when labor came. A woman behind a closed door, alone with the pain, was the standard arrangement. The loneliness was not accidental. It was built into the landscape. When something went wrong, the nearest help could be a full day's ride, or simply not there. And something went wrong far more often than the legend ever admitted. Remember the question. We are still climbing. Number 20. The Midwife Lottery. Everything depended on who was available. Martha Ballard, a midwife in Hallowell, Maine, delivered 816 babies between 1785 and 1812. Her diary is the most detailed obstetric record from the period. Nearly 1,000 deliveries scratched into a logbook by candlelight. She crossed frozen rivers at night to reach a woman in labor. She was extraordinary. She was also in settled New England, where the next house was a short walk, not a half-day's ride. On the plains and in the mountain territories, the midwife might be a neighbor woman who had given birth twice herself and nothing more. She might arrive with a bundle of clean rags and her own experience, and that was the full extent of the medical team. In the worst cases, a woman delivered entirely alone or with only her oldest child beside her. The hands that caught your baby were a matter of pure geography. Nothing else. Number 19. The doctor could be worse than no doctor at all. Before germ theory, physicians moved from patient to patient without washing their hands. Some walked to a delivery straight from the autopsy table. They wore the same coats they operated in, stiff with dried blood, and considered it a mark of experience. In 1843, Oliver Wendell Holmes published a paper called The Contagiousness of Puerperal Fever, arguing that doctors themselves were carrying death to women in labor. Dr. Charles Meigs of Philadelphia attacked him for it. Meigs declared that a gentleman's hands could not possibly carry disease. He called the idea an insult to the profession. The women kept dying, and the gentlemen kept delivering babies with blood still under their fingernails. In some lying in hospitals of the period, the maternal death rate topped 1 in 10. The safest place to give birth was often the poorest home, attended by a midwife who had never set foot in a medical school. Number 18. Patent medicines were the prenatal care of the era. Women dosed themselves with whatever was sold or handed down. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, marketed to mothers and infants, contained morphine. Laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, was sold over the counter and routinely taken for the aches of pregnancy. A woman could walk into any general store from Missouri to California and buy it without a question asked. Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound, marketed directly to women and sold by the millions, was roughly 18% alcohol. Dr. Pierce's favorite prescription promised to cure every female complaint known to medicine and delivered little more than alcohol and hope. No regulation, no ingredient labels, no warning of any kind. A woman trying to take care of herself was walking blind through a marketplace of poisons. And the men who sold those poisons never had to answer for a single death they caused. Number 17. Labor pain was considered God's punishment. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children. For much of the 19th century, segments of the clergy and the medical profession argued that relieving labor pain was an offense against the will of the Almighty. When James Young Simpson introduced chloroform for obstetric use in Edinburgh in 1847, the backlash was fierce. Queen Victoria accepted it for the birth of Prince Leopold in 1853, and that helped turn the tide in England. But west of the Mississippi, the entire argument was beside the point. No chloroform ever reached those cabins. What women had was what the land provided. Blue cohosh tea to speed labor, raspberry leaf to strengthen the contractions, whiskey if there was any in the house, a wooden spoon clenched between the teeth, a rag twisted around the bedpost, and whatever sound the walls could hold. That was all there was. Number 16. The wagon train did not stop. On the overland trails, labor arrived on the schedule of the company, not the mother. Women delivered in the back of a moving wagon, beside the road while the line waited, or in a canvas tent staked into mud. Catherine Hahn recorded in her 1849 diary that a woman in her company gave birth and was walking again within hours. Lillian Schlissel, who studied hundreds of overland diaries, found that women's accounts of the trail are dominated by birth and death in ways the men's diaries barely mention. A man might note the weather and the miles covered. His wife, in the same wagon, wrote about the woman 3 wagons back who delivered a stillborn child and buried it under a cottonwood tree before noon. The trail could not wait for recovery. Delays meant missing the mountain passes before snow closed them. A woman delivered, wrapped the child, and stood because the alternative was being left behind. And no one was coming back. We are halfway now, and the question I asked at the start still has not been answered. Keep it close. This list is about to get heavier. Number 15. Miscarriage was treated as ordinary. The rate was far higher than it is today. Poor nutrition, relentless physical work, no help of any kind. And the response was silence. Women recorded miscarriages in their diaries the way they recorded the weather. A line or two, a date. Then the next entry about chores or the road ahead. One woman in Schlissel's collection of trail diaries noted a miscarriage in a single sentence and wrote about mending a wagon cover in the next. Nobody understood why it happened. No one could tell a woman whether it was the heavy lifting that caused it, or the fall from the wagon step, or nothing she did at all. The guilt had nowhere to go, so it went underground, carried in silence alongside the grief. Nobody came to check on you. Nobody named what had happened. You bled. You cleaned up with whatever rags you had. You rested if the day allowed it. And the morning came whether you were ready or not. Number 14. A breech birth with no surgeon. A baby arriving feet first or turned sideways could kill them both. The procedures that could correct the position required a skilled practitioner and calm conditions. A trained doctor would reach inside the womb and attempt to turn the child by hand. It was agonizing for the mother and dangerous for both. In a dirt floor cabin with a neighbor for a midwife and one tallow candle for light, the skill was rarely there. Sometimes the only option was to wait and pray the child would shift on its own. The outcomes were brutal. Some women survived but never walked without pain again. Some did not survive at all, and the vast majority of their names were never written down. Number 13. Eclampsia, the seizure no one could explain. What we now call preeclampsia and eclampsia struck without warning. A woman who appeared perfectly healthy could suddenly convulse, lose consciousness, and die within hours. Today, a routine prenatal visit catches the early signs: rising blood pressure, protein in the urine, swelling that does not go down. In those cabins and trail camps, nobody could measure blood pressure. Nobody could test for the signs we watch for today. The only treatment that worked then and works now is delivery under controlled conditions, and nothing resembling controlled conditions could be found west of the settlements. Eclampsia was the invisible killer. No wound, no fever, no warning at all. Number 12. Hemorrhage, the fast killer. A healthy delivery could turn fatal within the hour. Postpartum hemorrhage took lives in minutes, and nothing in a homesteader's cabin could stop it. No transfusion, no intravenous fluid, no drug to contract the uterus. The blood soaked through the straw mattress and pooled on the floor, and nobody in that room could do a thing but watch. The standard remedy was ergot, a fungal extract that could force a contraction. It came from a dark growth on rye grain, and women had used it for centuries. In the right dose, it could save a life. In the wrong dose, it caused convulsions, gangrene, and a death of its own. The line between the remedy and the poison was a guess made by whoever was in the room, often a woman with no medical training at all. And the woman bleeding on that mattress had no say in which side of that guess she fell on. Number 11. Childbed fever, the great killer. Puerperal fever. The infection that entered through the birth canal carried most often on the unwashed hands of whoever delivered the child. It killed more women in the 18th and 19th centuries than any other complication of pregnancy. The onset was cruel. A woman who seemed fine after delivery would begin to shiver within a day or two. Then the fever climbed, the abdomen swelled and hardened with infection. The pain was relentless. Death came within a week in most cases, sometimes sooner, and the woman spent those last days fully aware of what was happening, watching it take her while her newborn cried in the next room. Ignaz Semmelweis, demonstrated in Vienna in 1847 that washing hands with chlorinated lime solution could cut the maternal death rate from over 10% to under 2%. He was ridiculed. He was driven from his post. He died in an asylum. Across the American West, no one had heard his name, and the fever kept burning through homes that never made it into any official record. Number 10. The injuries no one spoke of: obstetric fistula, uterine prolapse, tears that were never stitched. Repeated childbirth without surgical repair left women with chronic and disabling conditions they carried in total silence for the rest of their lives. A fistula meant constant leaking that no amount of washing could manage. It meant isolation within isolation, because even in a world with few comforts, this was the condition that made a woman feel most alone. A prolapse meant the uterus itself descending, sometimes visibly, and every hour of standing made it worse. These injuries did not kill. They simply took away every scrap of dignity a woman had left and asked her to keep working anyway. Dr. J. Marion Sims developed his repair techniques in Montgomery, Alabama in the 1840s, operating on enslaved women named Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy without anesthesia, sometimes performing 30 operations on the same woman. He is still called the father of modern gynecology. The women in those cabins and camps had no access to any surgeon at all. They lived with it, they worked with it, they bore the next child with it, and they told no one. Hold the question now. We are close. Number 9. A cesarean section was a farewell. Before antiseptic surgery, the operation was performed only when the mother was already expected to die. The aim was to save the child, not the woman. The incision was made with whatever blade was available through skin and muscle and uterine wall, without anesthesia in many cases, and with no reliable way to stop the bleeding or prevent infection afterward. Maternal mortality after a cesarean in this era exceeded 85% in most documented cases. In the territories, it was almost never attempted. No surgeon, no clean field, no way to close the wound. If the baby could not come on its own, both were lost. And the husband buried his wife and his child on the same afternoon in the same plot, and then stood in a kitchen he did not know how to use in a house that no longer made sense. Today, nearly 1 in 3 American births is a cesarean. In the 1850s, it was a death sentence spoken out loud. Number 8. She wrote her will before the birth. This was common enough to be unremarkable. Women made legal and spiritual preparations before each delivery the way a soldier prepares before a march he may not return from. They wrote letters to be opened only if they died. They named who would raise the children. They listed which belongings should go to which child: the quilt to the oldest daughter, the Bible to the son. They said goodbye to their husbands on paper in case the spoken version never came. These letters survive in archives across the country. Some of them folded and sealed and never opened because the woman lived. She would take the letter back, tuck it away, and write a new one before the next birth. Some of them read by lantern light by a man left alone with children he did not know how to raise. Number 7. Stillbirth and then morning chores. Infant mortality in the territories was staggering. Best estimates place it between 15 and 25% of all babies dead before their first birthday, depending on the region and the decade. Stillbirth shadowed every pregnancy: 9 months of carrying, hours of labor, and then a child that never drew breath. The mother would wrap the small body in whatever clean cloth she had. If there was time and the ground was not frozen, the father dug a grave that afternoon. If the ground was frozen, the body was kept in the cold until spring. Some women buried 3 children before the age of 30. Some buried more. The grief was real, but the language for it barely existed, and the community around them expected silence, not mourning. By dawn, the cow still needed milking. The fire still needed building. The land offered no pause for grief. It simply handed you the next day, identical to the last, minus a child. Number 6. The trail was a nursery and a graveyard in the same mile. An estimated 20,000 people died on the overland trails between 1840 and 1860. A staggering number of them were infants and small children. Cholera, dysentery, accidents, and the sheer exhaustion of the crossing took them by the hundreds. Women gave birth on the trail and buried babies on the trail, sometimes in the same journey, sometimes in the same week. Lodisa Frizzell, crossing in 1852, wrote of passing grave after grave along the Platte River, many of them small. The wooden markers were already leaning by the time the next year's wagons passed. Some had names, most did not. Graves were left unmarked or deliberately driven over with wagon wheels to stop the wolves and coyotes from digging. A mother could not mark the spot. She could not go back. She walked away from a patch of earth that looked like every other patch for 1,000 miles, and she kept walking west. The trail behind her erased the only place her child had ever been. Number 5. The damage stacked. Each pregnancy weakened the body further. Each delivery carried the harm of the last. By the 5th or 6th or 7th birth, a woman had absorbed years of injury that was never repaired. Pelvic bones loosened and never fully tightened again. Teeth fell out from the calcium the body gave to the child it was building. A woman of 35 moved like a woman of 60, and no one thought it strange. These women did not age the way their Eastern counterparts did. They wore out. The photographs from the 1860s and 70s show women in their early 40s who look decades older. Their hands are thick, their backs are bent, their eyes are clear, and their faces are set, and they are looking straight into the camera as if daring it to flinch. The camera caught what the diaries never said. The body kept a record no pen ever matched. Number 4. The death rate. The numbers are hard to fix exactly, but the best available research puts a woman's lifetime risk at roughly 1 in 8 across all her pregnancies combined. In the middle of the 1800s, maternal mortality ran between 600 and 900 deaths for every 100,000 live births. Today, that number is roughly 22 per 100,000. That gap is the full distance between their world and ours. Think about what 1 in 8 meant in a community. A small settlement of 40 families might have 5 or 6 women pregnant in any given year. Within a decade, at least one of those women would be dead from it. Everyone in that settlement knew someone. Everyone had stood at a grave. 8 children meant 8 separate turns against those odds. The math was simple, and the math was merciless. Number 3, most of them were never counted. Before vital registration reached the territories, and in most areas it did not arrive until the late 19th century or later, maternal deaths simply went unrecorded. A mother who bled out on a Nebraska homestead in 1862 might appear in no official document at all. No death certificate, no coroner's report, no column in a county ledger. Her husband might note it in a family Bible, if they owned one. A neighbor might mention it in a letter, but the state did not count her. The territory did not count her. If she was buried on the property, the marker was wood. Within 10 years, it rotted. Within a generation, the grave was gone. The plow turned the earth over, and the grass grew back, and the place where she lay became just another stretch of prairie. Today, researchers who try to reconstruct the true maternal death toll work with fragments. A diary here, a church record there, a census that lists a man as widowed with no explanation why. The true scale of what happened is, by definition, an undercount. We will never have the real number. We only know it was worse than anything the surviving records show. Number 2. They knew. Pioneer women were not innocent of the danger ahead. They had watched their mothers go through this, their sisters, their neighbors. They had stood beside beds where the woman never got up. They had washed the blood from the sheets and dug the small graves with their own hands. Every pregnancy was entered with open eyes. You can hear it in the diaries. The tone is not dramatic. It is plain and flat and steady, the way a person writes when she is preparing for something she understands completely. One woman wrote to her sister before a birth and asked only that her children be told she loved them if the worst should come. No fear in the letter, no self-pity, just a practical arrangement made by a woman who understood probability better than most men who claimed to. The wills, the letters, the quiet instructions left for a husband who might be raising the children alone by morning. They knew the odds, and they faced them anyway. And now, number 1, the most brutal truth on this list. They chose it again. The average frontier woman bore between 7 and 8 children. Some bore 10, some bore 12. Each pregnancy was a fresh walk into every single truth on this list. The isolation, the silence, the pain without relief, the fever, the hemorrhage, the chance of dying that never got smaller no matter how many times you survived it. And they chose it, not once, again and again and again. Not out of ignorance. The frontier demanded children. It demanded hands for the fields, for the livestock, for the breaking of new ground. A homestead without children was a homestead without a future. And so these women did the calculation that no one ever wrote down, the one that weighed their own lives against the survival of everything they had built, and they chose the risk. And these women understood in a way no textbook has ever captured that the price of building a life on that land was paid in their own bodies. They looked at the odds, they looked at the graves, and they got up the next morning and did the work. That is the truth that belongs at the top of this list. Not a disease, not a complication. A decision made over and over with full knowledge by women whose courage has no name in any history book the movies ever bothered to open. So who built the legend that buried them? The dime novelists who turned frontier women into fainting heroines and silent helpmates standing behind better men. The Hollywood westerns that reduced pregnancy to a plot device when they showed it at all. The wife at the window. The dramatic birth resolved in 60 seconds by a calm man with rolled-up sleeves boiling water he never needed. John Wayne films gave you 100 frontier stories, and barely one of them had a pregnant woman in the frame. The textbooks that recorded the frontier as a story of men and horses and treaties and gunfights, and treated women's lives as a footnote in small print. Even the pioneer memorial statues almost always show a man pointing west, his wife standing behind him, her body and its labor invisible. Amelia Stewart Knight walked 8 months pregnant through river crossings and never wrote the word. The movies gave us women on fainting couches. The record gives us something the legend makers could not sell because it was too brutal, too female, and too unglamorous to put on a single poster. Here is my answer to the question I planted at the start. The most dangerous thing about being pregnant in that world was not any single entry on this list. It was the repetition. The sheer number of times a woman walked into the same catalog of danger, her body weaker each time, the conditions around her no better than the last. That was not something done to them. That was something they chose. And the fact that you and I are here tonight, watching this on a screen, is the proof that enough of them survived it. They survived it enough times by enough slim margins that the line held. Their children grew up and had children of their own, and the country filled in behind them, and the sod houses gave way to frame houses and then to towns with hospitals and doctors who washed their hands. Today, a woman can see a doctor, track a pregnancy week by week, hear the heartbeat on a screen, and choose when and whether to have a child at all. Every one of those choices was built on the backs of women who had none. The next time you drive through the Great Plains and see the grass stretching flat to the horizon, remember that under some of that grass, in ground, no one has marked. There are women who gave everything they had so that the people who came after them could live differently. There is a woman with no headstone and no name who did this 7 times and never said a word about it where anyone could hear. Which of these truths hit you the hardest? Tell me below. And if you want the real story behind another piece of frontier life the movies never showed you, the next one is waiting for you right now.